Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to tackle the rear diff oil and I'm going to change the pumpkin gasket as well that goes on that cover. As you can see, it's quite sort of wet on there, so I'm going to try and clean it up. So it obviously looks as though it's either been weeping or leaking, so even around the gasket here there's quite a lot of dirt and oil and grease on there. So I'm going to clean everything up, drop the oil, and then change the gasket as well in that. So there is quite a few bolts that go around it, so you want to take all these off all the way to the top around there. So it's called a pumpkin gasket because of the shape of the actual cover. But what you always want to do is you always want to loosen the fill hole first, which is that, before you do the drain hole, because if you can't put oil back in it, you're going to have problems. So the drain hole is actually that one just there. So again, as you can see, very wet underneath there, which suggests that the gasket's kind of had it. So that's the reason why I said let me just change it anyway, drop the oil, put some oil in there. At least I know it's the right oil in a brand new gasket, so it just keeps things healthy at the back of the car as well. So yeah, I'm going to clean it up and then get that changed. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. now that the housing's all cleaned up to a good place, remove the old gaskets and removed as much of the RTV sealant as I can. Let's just have a look at the teeth on the actual diff itself. Just make sure there's no damage. Okay, so the diff itself seems to be in fairly good condition, which is good to see. I can't see any grooving or any sort of damage to any of the teeth on the inside, so it looks like even though it may have been leaking the oil, there was enough in there to still keep it lubricated, and it prevented from getting too hot and damaged. Because what will happen is if it gets too hot underneath there, then things tend to bind. So this is a high pressure differential, so it does run with quite some force. One thing to note as well is the bolts were not very tight at all. Literally a flick of the wrist and they were loose, so I don't think that they were actually holding on very well. I have looked at to try and see what the torque should be. I think it's again 50 like the head cover, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and see if I can get them tight by hand, and then we can just check it out. But yeah, obviously feel free to use a torque wrench. It said it's about 50 pound-feet of torque on there. But yeah, so I'm going to clean up the head cover itself, the pumpkin cover, have a look, put the new gasket on, make sure everything fits okay, and then we'll pop it straight back on. Okay, so here's the old cover. As you can see, they've put quite a lot of RTV sealant on that. Even there was some in the actual screw holes as well, which didn't help. So I think that's probably also what prevented them from tightening the bolts properly. I'm hoping that won't be too much of an issue for us here. So I'll need to give this a good clean out, scrape away as much as I can from that, give it a good clean, and then we can put the new gasket, offer up the new gasket and see if everything fits okay. Okay, so I've cleaned it up, as you can see, a little bit better than it was before. Trying to get as much of the RTV off as I can. So there's still a little bits, as you can see, there's still bits around the edge and so on. And there's still a bit of old gasket and things in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a wire brush. Excuse my wire brush, it's a little bit battered, to be honest, and then some sandpaper, very lightly. Don't go crazy with the sandpaper because it's aluminium. You don't want to kind of damage that or anything like that. So I'm just going to try and clean it up as best as I can, take off all the excess gaskets that's still on here, and then we can try and put the new one back on. Okay, so as you can see, the cover is nice and clean now. Brand new gasket. So it is only a paper gasket that goes onto it. But yeah, so the gasket should fit in like that. So there shouldn't be any need for any other sealant on there. It should just offer it up like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to dab a little bit of oil around the actual differential on the car side, because that obviously I didn't want to scrape that or use a wire brush or sander. I didn't want anything fine getting onto the teeth and the gears inside the actual differential. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of oil. It is clean in terms of the differential side. It is clean around the inner ring. So I'm hoping that's enough just to get it on there good. Again, if I torque down the bolts enough, all the nuts and screws around the cover as well, hopefully that will compress enough to just give it a good seal on there. So yeah, fingers crossed that actually works and we don't have any more leaking or weeping from the actual bell housing. Okay, so the recommended oil for this is an EP90 in a GL4. So I've done a lot of research on this, trying to find the right one that fits the car. A lot of people have said don't use anything that's GL4/GL5. It needs to be specifically GL4 because there's sort of yellow metals inside, so there's brass bearings. So as you can see at this one at the bottom, it says yellow metal safe. So that's what we wanted to go for, so that's why I've chosen to use this particular oil for the job. So yeah, so the brand, again, I've never used this brand before, but yeah, hopefully it does the job. It meets all the specifications that needs to be for this particular differential. Okay, so what I've done is I've used two of the nuts itself just to hold the gasket in place, because obviously it'll keep falling out when you take it out. So yeah, just to hold it in place until we can get this on there properly and seated. I've just put them on there with that just to hold it in place on the top, as you can see. So I've used 2 screws on there just to hold the gasket in place on the other side, otherwise it obviously will fall off when you try to offer it up, and it will be quite tricky to get it on there. So I've just used 2 of those to hold it in place while I place it on the car, on the differential, and then we can tighten it up with the other bolts as well, just to make sure everything lines up all right. So after installing the diff cover, after giving it a good clean and using the paper gasket, it was still leaking from the bottom here. So just where you can see the wetness on the diff itself, it was still leaking from that point, which is quite annoying. So I think either the surfaces was not clean enough to mate properly on there. Now there is still rust and dirt on this, which I've tried to clean as best as I can, without trying to damage the actual surface itself. Same thing with the diff. I didn't want to sand or use anything abrasive in there just to try and prevent any dirt or dust from going into the actual diff itself, which I didn't want to happen. So what I've decided to do is I've done some research on this, and there is this gasket maker called Permatex. So it's specific for differentials and transfer cases. It resists the harsh oil that goes into a diff itself. So I'm going to try and use this to make a gasket on this. which I'm hoping will then seal it up pretty well, prevent any more leaking really, because yeah, it was constantly weeping. I don't want to drive the car like that at all, and it's not a good fix for it really. So yeah, I'm going to try this gasket maker, try and see if I can get it to seal up better and just become a little bit more airtight. Okay, so what we want to do is, the gasket maker is ready. You don't want to put too much on there, because as you can see, when I took it off originally, there was a lot of gunk sitting on the inside of this, and the gasket silicone had gone on the inside. You don't want it to happen, because one, it'll disrupt the oil flow, but also it'll sit on the inside and could potentially dissolve with the actual oil itself, so you don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of a bead around each hole and then join it in the center, just enough so when you push it down, it sort of compresses in that area, but doesn't sort of spill out everywhere and make a mess. So yeah, just don't be too generous with it. Just try and put enough that you think is the right amount, just to kind of make it seal quite well. Okay, so as you can see, I'm not going to be on British Bake Off anytime soon for my icing skills, but ultimately that should be enough to kind of seal against the cover itself. You don't want to go too crazy with it, just enough that it makes a seal. I've put a little bit more at the bottom because this is where it was leaking the most. But yeah, when this pushes down, it should then bind to the actual diff itself, and that should be enough to just compress it and make a good enough seal on that. Okay, so the cover's back on the diff again. So the recommended torque setting for this is about 30 pound-feet of torque. I'm actually going to go 35 on mine, just because of the condition of what my cover was in, and obviously with the gasket maker on there as well. I just wanted to be a little bit more snug, just knowing that it was leaking before. So with the pattern that you want to go in this, it's kind of like a star pattern. So go from there to this corner, and then come back down to this one, to that corner, and then vice versa. Just go crisscross until everything is tight, and then just do a round again, just to make sure everything is snug as possible. Okay, that's the cover back on, with the gasket maker all torqued up to about 35 foot-pounds. So I'm going to leave it to set for a little bit. So it says it can take up to 2 hours for the gasket maker to set. So I'm going to leave it for a couple of hours and then try and fill it with oil, just to give it the best chance of just drying up, so we don't get any weeping or anything like that, you know, through the gasket. But it looks to be okay, because there was still oil leaking out of the diff itself, but as I was torquing it down, gave it one wipe, and it doesn't seem to be leaking anymore. So looks positive, hoping this has done the job, and yeah, get the diff nice and sealed and running well. Okay, to fill it up, what I've got is an old battery, and I've got a pump here, an oil pump. So what it does is, it actually, from the bottle, it'll feed straight into the filler hole. So obviously you just need to take time, because obviously it'll come out quite quickly, so you need to just be steady on the button to turn it off, which is on the back of the pump itself. So yeah, so it's really handy. It saves you having to manually pump the oil back in. So what we want to happen here is, we want to fill it up until it sort of trickles out of the fill hole, and that'll be the good point. So the car's, like I said previously, the car is fairly level now, in terms of how it's sitting, so we don't want to overfill it. So if the car's off slightly, you may overfill. So yeah, literally wait for the trickle, clean it up, put the nut back in, job done. Okay, so that's pretty much it. All we got to do now is tighten up the fill nut. And that's it. Again, don't over tighten it. Just be a little bit gentle with it, but just make sure it's snug enough that it doesn't leak out. But yeah, as you can see, not too difficult of a job. Just be careful and make sure we clean it properly, but it seems to be holding the oil now. It doesn't seem to be leaking, but obviously you're going to check it after a drive. So tomorrow I'll give it a drive and then just see if it has any more leaks. But yeah, it looks like everything's okay. It was weeping even though it was on before from the bottom nut here. Obviously someone's jacked it up and they've bent the housing slightly as well, which could be contributing to that. But it looks to be fine now. It doesn't seem to be dripping from there. So yeah, just monitor it and keep an eye on it. But yeah, should be driving sweet now.